Today we are going to be doing a comparison between the DJI Avata 2 and a real FPV drone. I'm going to be talking about what the biggest differences are, why the Avata 2 is not considered a real FPV drone, and most importantly, if you're in the market, which one is best for you. Without further ado, let's do it. Okay, so first off, let's break down what a real FPV drone even is. So the Avata 2 is an all-in-one, pre-built, ready-to-fly drone from DJI. Most people, when they buy one, they'll get it with the goggles and controller and just have the full kit. Within 5 minutes of taking it out of the box, it is good to go and ready to fly. It has a solid camera internally, so you don't really need to buy an additional action camera to film with. It also has a bunch of really cool safety features like DJI's really freaking good GPS, a return to home button, and on top of that, you can take photos with it if you want. Now, on the other hand, this is a real FPV drone. They're typically faster, way more customizable, big enough to mount an action camera on top, and just in general are geared more towards people who kind of know what they're doing. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're better in every single way. I'm a professional FPV pilot. I own a ton of real FPV drones, and I still use the Avata 2 all the time for shoots. So let's talk about some different use cases for both and talk about which one's better. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be comparing the Avata to a couple of my other bigger FPV drones. This is the Cineflow 5 from iFlight, and this is the Cine LR from iFlight. And I also have a big wall of other drones up there. First off, let's cover setup and ease of use. Now, both the Avata 2 and the other drones that I'm talking about are all bind and fly, meaning once you get the drone, it's super easy to just hook up to your remote controller and goggles and get in the air. If you get the Fly More combo with the Avata 2, the drone's already linked to the controllers, so you just save a little bit of extra steps there. But if you buy one of these other drones, you just have to link them, which is a really easy process. However, when it comes to ease of use, the Avata 2 has a huge advantage over the other ones, largely due to its battery system. So the Avata 2 Fly More combo comes with this battery pack where you basically just have 3 batteries all in this hub, and it all charges via USB-C. And when you're charging, you literally just plug it in, wait for all the blinky lights to fill up, and then you're good to go. But for traditional FPV drones, there's a ton of different batteries that you can use, and the charging process is a little bit more complicated. And with those batteries, you have to be a little bit more careful because they're pretty liable to catch on fire if you don't charge them and store them correctly. You also need to buy a completely separate charger specifically for the batteries. These are the batteries, and you basically just need to plug one end in here, one end in here. Make sure you have all the settings right on the charger and then hit go. There's all sorts of different types of batteries like this, so you just need to make sure your settings are right on the charger or these will catch fire. With that being said, because you can use all sorts of different types of batteries on these other drones, the one advantage is you can get bigger batteries for longer flight times or smaller ones for a lighter overall setup, which helps with performance. But yeah, this shit just takes up a lot of room in your bag as well. Also, if you're using a bigger FPV drone, you're likely going to want to mount an action camera on top, which just adds another little layer of complexity. So in this category, Avata 2 definitely wins. Before we get into the next part of the video, I have to tell you guys that this week my mind has been blown. And honestly, it's really not that often that happens for me. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Every single video you're seeing here is completely AI generated using Artlist's brand new Gen AI, which is the world's simplest AI video generator built specifically for creators. Just when I thought Artlist could not get any better, it just did. If you're in the content world or honestly just social media in general, you know that AI generated videos are everywhere. And I know a lot of creators that are super worried about this because they think they're gonna be out of a job. But how I look at it is we're on the ground floor of something that's going to completely change the industry. So if you're someone who learns how to use it, you're going to have a huge leg up on your competition. In the past, I haven't tried any AI generators just because honestly, like the whole process was a little bit intimidating and seemed complicated. But on Artlist, it's so simple. First, you just generate an image. This can be any image you want in a ton of different styles. Studio portraits, macro, photorealistic, comic noir, cinematic earth, and a ton more. All you have to do is simply describe the image you're after, and you can even use their AI to kind of spice up what you wrote, and then click go. Then once the image is spit out, switch over to the image to video page, describe the movement you're after, and hit generate. This can take a few minutes as it does take a lot of computer power. But with just a few clicks, you can create insane videos like this. So like I said, somehow Artlist has gotten even better, and if you're someone who does want to give the Gen AI or any of the other amazing features that Artlist has to offer a try, there's a link down below where you can get 2 free months. Thank you Artlist for sponsoring this video, and thank you for just constantly putting out features that help us creators be on the forefront of this technology. Okay, now back to the video, which, how do you even know it's not just all AI generated these days? You never know. While we're on the topic of batteries, let's talk about flight times. On paper, the flight time of the Avata 2 is 23 minutes, but that is just massively incorrect. I would say I usually get between 8 to 12 minutes of flight time on the Avata, which honestly for a drone of that style is pretty good. Because on the other hand, real FPV drones usually don't get anywhere near that battery time, unless you're putting a really big battery on there and doing something like long range. Most of my 5-inch quads, like this one here with a 1500 milliamp battery on it, will fly anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes. However, with this type of drone, you have a ton more options. For example, my Helion 10 drone that's hanging up on the wall back there, if I put a giant lithium-ion battery on there, I can fly close to 20 minutes. Lithium-ion batteries are a little bit less punchy than LiPo batteries, but they give you more overall flight time. So with traditional FPV drones, you got way more options here. Right after battery life, I want to talk about max range. Now, most of the time with FPV, you're not really limited by transmission distance, you're limited by battery life. The max range that I've been able to get on the Avata 2, where I just completely drained the battery, was 4,200 meters or about 2.6 miles, which honestly, for a drone that looks like this, is pretty insane. Most drones that are that small, Cinewhoop style, I would be very hesitant to go anywhere over 1,000 meters, just due to the fact that the battery would die. And it's just because when you have these smaller props, the flight is actually a lot more inefficient. But if you have a bigger drone like this Cine LR 7-inch drone or the Helion 10, the props are way bigger. You can put a way bigger battery on there so you can just fly out to crazy distances. I've taken my Helion 10 out to like 8,000 meters before. Now on the topic of flight performance, you get vastly different results between the Avata 2 and other drones. The Avata 2 is a small Cinewhoop style drone, so it's not really built for mountain diving or doing crazy flips or freestyle or anything like that. However, that doesn't mean it can't do any of that. You can mess around with rates on the Avata 2, and I've got it to handle pretty similarly to my 5-inch drones. But since it does have lithium-ion batteries, it's not going to be quite as punchy or as powerful. So if you want to chase fast subjects like cars or something, the 5-inch quad is going to be way better at that. The next thing I want to compare is mountain diving, because that's one of the most fun ways to use FPV in my opinion. It's just such an amazing experience seeing a mountain or a big ridgeline or something and being able to fly all the way to the top and kind of surf back down. And while the Avata 2 has great range and battery life, it has one fatal flaw, which is actually probably the most annoying thing about the drone, and that is altitude limits. So the Avata 2 maxes out at about 500 meters or 1,600 feet, which is so frustrating if you're trying to dive anything that's above that height. Last month, I was on a motorcycle trip in Peru, and we visited one of the world's tallest waterfalls. It's like 2,600 feet or something like that, and because of space limitations, I just brought the Avata 2. So we hiked all the way up there, and I was able to dive the bottom portion of the waterfall, but I really wanted a specific shot where I kind of came in from above and then swooped down, and literally right at the top of the waterfall, it just hit that height limit and I wasn't able to get the shot. I was able to get a really good shot, and honestly, I was super impressed with how it performed when I was diving, but it was just so frustrating that it maxed out on height. And again, it's just a trade-off. I didn't want to bring any of my other FPV drones because they take up a ton of space, and honestly, on the motorcycle trips, we're just super tired, and I brought them before, and just the thought of doing all the little setup stuff, keeping batteries charged, just made it so I didn't get that many shots at all. At least with the Avata 2, I know it's easy to set up and I will get FPV shots. All right, let's talk about another big one, which is camera quality. The Avata 2 has a super powerful camera inside it, shooting up to 4K 100 frames per second. And in most situations, it looks great. However, it does have some limitations. Because these traditional FPV drones are so much bigger, you can mount an action camera on top. You can on the Avata, but it's gonna perform pretty weird. Sometimes I still do it, but you lose a lot of performance. And I shoot all of my FPV content on GoPro. Some people use the DJI Osmo Action 5, but there's a few reasons that make GoPro the clear winner in my head for FPV. Now, I do have O4 air units installed in all of my traditional FPV drones, which basically makes them have the same camera as the Avata 2, but having the ability to mount an action camera on top allows you to get way better footage. The Osmo Action 5 is really similar to the camera on the DJI Avata 2 and the O4 air unit. First off, while specs may seem similar on both cameras, the footage coming out of the GoPro looks way more natural in my opinion. opinion. I just haven't been able to get that same natural look on the Osmo Action 5 or the Avata 2 footage. On top of that, on the GoPro, you can shoot 8:7 aspect ratio, which basically allows you to shoot in pretty much a square, so you can crop both horizontally and vertically. So for someone like me who wants to post stuff on Instagram and YouTube, it's way better. Okay, let's talk about reliability and durability. The frame on the Avata 2 is all in one piece, so if you crash it and break it, you're gonna have to send it in for repair. That being said, I've absolutely tanked this thing so many times and I've never had it break once. In contrast, these other FPV drones are super modular, so if you crash and break an arm or break a motor or anything like that, if you know how to solder and you want to spend a bit of a time like learning how to actually repair these things, you can repair them pretty easily. It does require a bit of know-how, so if you do want to repair it yourself, you're gonna have to spend some time learning how to solder and do all that. The frames are made out of carbon fiber, and very rarely do I actually break something on them when I do crash. So in this category, if you're just starting, an Avata 2 is gonna be way more appealing, but if you wanna learn how to solder and fix your own drones, traditional FPV drones can be cheaper. Okay, just a few things to cover before my final thoughts. One massive advantage that the Avata 2 has over any other drones is a super accurate GPS. So if you're ever in a pinch, you can just hit a button and either hover in place exactly where you are at that moment, or if you lose connection behind something, it'll stop and then fly back home. And it's really accurate. You can install GPSs on traditional FPV drones as well, but they're far less accurate. It's kind of one of those things where if you lose connection behind a mountain or something like that, it's just a guess whether or not it's gonna make it back to you. And sometimes even when it is coming back to you, the link between the RC and everything just won't happen. So you just have to hope and pray that it lands next to you. All right, so the final thing to cover, which is a big one, is cost. In this category, I'm not gonna cover the goggles or controller because those are kind of separate and you can use both of those with whatever drone you choose. I have a separate video that I just posted that's a massive guide to all of that stuff. So whether it's goggles, controllers, these drones, I talk through all of the ones that I have and all of the ones that I would recommend. And I will link that right here if you wanna check that out after you're done watching this video. So the Avata 2 costs $489 on DJI's website. And depending on what traditional FPV drone you go with, you can expect to spend anywhere from $450 for a kind of budget-friendly 5-inch drone, all the way up to $1,000 for something like the Helion 10. So, after all that, in conclusion, which is the best one for you? If you want a solid drone that comes in an all-in-one package that you can just pick up, fly right away, and kind of just avoid a lot of the complexity of traditional FPV drones, the Avata 2 is definitely your best bet. It has an amazing GPS built in. The camera quality on it is really good, so you don't have to spend extra money on a GoPro, and it's my #1 recommendation for beginners. However, if you want something with a bit more power that's big enough to mount an action camera on top, a traditional FPV drone is probably your best bet. There are a ton of options out there, whether you want a bigger drone for mountain surfing, a smaller 5-inch drone for more technical stuff like chasing cars or flying through abandoned buildings. There's really just a ton of amazing options out there. It just requires a little bit more know-how. Again, I have a 2025 FPV gear video where I cover literally every single drone that I have and talk about why I have it, what it's good for, who it's good for, and a ton of other info about it all that you should really check out after you're done watching this video. I'll leave a link up here. So thank you guys for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed, and hopefully see you on my 2025 FPV drone gear video. All right, peace.